Chris, it is that time. It is product lab time. And obviously this month has been a crazy stinking month between product achievements, company achievements, and kind of just partner and customer feedback. So I've got an action-packed lineup. I'm really focused on where we're going to go. So today's going to be all about the future, not so much looking at the past. Cody, appreciate you jumping in from Austin. Super curious where everybody's coming from. It looks like we have a boatload of folks on here. So I'm in Florida today. I was in Puerto Rico this weekend, and by the way, that was amazing. Yeah. So where are you at, Chris? You look like you're in your office.
I am. I'm at my home in Maryland, just chilling.
Man, oh man. So I see some folks. It looks like we've got some New York in here. Everything else. Chris, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start a little bit of screen sharing. I know that's usually my favorite way to get it going, and I'm just going to do full on screen share. Let's ebb and flow throughout this episode, really focus on, I think, where we're going to go. With that said, I really appreciate it, on some of the latest news, right, Jeremy? That's it's been a wild ride. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of that really going into this. And where I want to throw is take a peek at today's agenda. We're talking about all kinds of things, not just what's straight out of the lab, but we're really talking about all kinds of different places where Huntress is going to go on our product roadmap. We're going to get really down and deep on kind of what the next couple years probably looks like. So you can imagine some things will be closer to in stone. Some things are definitely going to be written in pencil. And we're going to really talk about where the industry is going. So Chris, do you want to maybe like jump into what's straight out of the lab? I know my face is on here, but I've got all kinds of stuff to cover. So
yeah, let's do it.
Go for it, man.
All right, cool. So this is a thing that we have been kind of talking about for a while, which is more and better integration with PSAs, ticketing systems, like however it is that we are, interacting with you and how the SOC is letting you know of stuff. So one of the things that we just rolled out is basically a notification of remediation approvals. So when we send you an incident, it goes into your ticketing system. You click over to the Huntress dashboard, say, yep, this looks like a bad thing. You click remediate. We'll do the remediation, and then we'll also go update the ticket. So right now we've got support for Halo PSA, ConnectWise, Synchro, and Autotask. And that way, when you're in your tooling, when you're in your regular workflow, you can see, oh, somebody has already scheduled the remediations. This is already in progress. That looks good, right? So just better integrations, and there's more of this type of stuff to come.
Yep. Remember, you got Q&A going in here. So if you got like a question, hey, what's coming next? What other PSAs, where you'd like to see it? Let us know. This right here is supposed to be for your feedback, interactive on that end. So obviously, really thank everybody who kind of helped give us feedback of where we were going. With that said, Chris, I know where we're going is in a lot of directions. Some of the new nav, you want to talk about what we're making room for?
Yeah. So, we initially started out with, we were one product. The actual left-hand navigation was really just some of our capabilities in terms of like process insights and external recon and all of that kind of stuff. But as we've branched out to having more products and each of those products have their own capabilities, that left-hand nav was really starting to get busy. So we wanted to do a little update there to make some room for some new products, for some additional capabilities, and so that's where we're at. And you can expect more of these things to continue to roll out in the months ahead.
Yep. And if you are talking, like, for instance, if you use feedback.huntress.com to submit your feedback of what you want to see us do and what you want to build, if you are subscribed to that thread, this is now shipped. You would have got notified. So make sure you're participating, and hats off to the platform team that managed to get this out the door a quarter earlier than we expected. So pretty excited about that.
Yep. And then there were a couple of just smaller miscellaneous improvements, but improvements nonetheless. So we wanted to provide the ability for you as an end customer who's receiving the incident reports to give us feedback on the quality, whether or not they were useful to you. And we're really trying to understand, when somebody rejects a report, they're rejecting it because it's wrong? Are they rejecting it because they already did something? Are they happy with, hey, you reported this and like, I know, but don't do anything? So we're really trying to get some more feedback on that. For a while, people have been asking us to increase the dashboard timeout. So for security reasons, we log people out after 30 minutes. Just that way, like if you forget to log out and somebody else comes to your machine later, there's only a 30-minute window in which they could, steal your credentials and become you. We've increased this to give you the option to like increase it to 60 minutes. And then for people who like to maybe in the office, like have a dashboard up or on a side monitor, you got the Huntress dashboard running and you don't want to continually get logged out of it and have to log back in. The command center will actually refresh now automatically. So if you've got the command center up so you can see how many incidents are there and all that kind of stuff, it'll just keep you logged in. So you don't ever have to worry about that machine getting logged out. And for security awareness training. So we import learners from a bunch of different systems. We can import them from like a Windows LDAP or different things. For Google Workspace, we were just importing all of the users in the Google Workspace, but that doesn't necessarily align with what partners and IT teams wanted us to, like the users they actually wanted to get in there. So now you can define a group in your Google Workspace to say, like, these are my security awareness training users. Attach that group to all your users you want to be associated with that. And then in Huntress, like in the security awareness training product, you can say only import users from this group. And so you get a little bit more granularity as to who gets imported. So just a little user experience update.
Hey, Chris, we've already got a question. Matt hit us up. And before we move on to some of the more specific things, to like different product lines on Endpoint and the SIEM side of the house, Matt hit us up and said, hey, what's the chance we can get something like a two-way sync for notes? That way, like the SOC and the teams, whether it's an internal IT help desk or an external IT help desk, like an MSP, MSSP, telco, printer, copier dealer, et cetera, can communicate and kind of embolden that bidirectional comms. So Matt, I mean, I'm more than happy to tell you, like from both mine and Chris's level, this is something we're meaning shipping as in supporting. Also shipping as in it is building on the roadmap. It is something that we're aware of. And it's something that we think that this is, I would call table stakes in the SOC of the future, especially as we communicate back and forth. Chris, as you run a lot of the architects that build some of this infrastructure that spans many products. You want to give any thoughts that you think about bidirectional communication? And then I'll get ready to tee up to some of the next big ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that we can do there and that we want to do for folks to be able to like you said, put comments or notes on the ticket in the PSA, have that come to our SOC so that they can review them, they can respond, really give that, like, make it feel like a SOC and not just a one way we throw incidents at you and you have to deal with them. We've also talked about like when an incident is resolved, maybe the remediation's run, it's fully resolved. How do we then put a comment back into that ticket and give you even the flexibility to go into Huntress and say, hey, when it's resolved, close that ticket in my PSA. Maybe you want that, maybe you don't. Some people have specific things that they want to do. But that's a lot of the way that we're really trying to improve upon that. We started out with just the very basic, here's an incident. It is what it is. And now we're saying, like, how do we up level that to be more of a two-way thing? So Matt, I think you're right on it there.
All right, Chris, we're going to keep it going. And this is going in your direction. You're right. We've talked a little bit about, miscellaneous products, the platform. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in SIEM. I know there's all kinds of stuff. You're personally helping lead this. So
yeah, so some updates on SIEM. We've now got support for parsing syslog from SonicWall devices as well as Cisco Meraki devices. We've added in kind of general support for two common logging formats, Leaf and Ceph or CEF. And that'll allow us to support more of these devices. There's many of the devices we've looked at can support CEF as a format for sending data. So we're working on that and more data sources and as well as a configuration UI coming soon. So as we start to add in more of these, you'll need some way to be able to go in and set them up and provide credentials or whatever. So that is what's coming. And then you can see down here at the bottom just some of the metrics. So I wanted to show some of how things have changed over since last month to this month, right? So we've added a bunch of new partners, a decent amount more machines reporting data, and the volume of data has just really ramped up significantly. You can see we went from 850 terabytes to almost 2 petabytes total, right? So it's really going now.
Chris, any reminder? I mean, for folks that want to participate, the SIEM is in essentially a private preview right now. Are you still accepting people to come on in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're turning it on for people. We've seen no issues with performance. That was the main reason for kind of the private beta. We wanted to be able to control the rollout. We didn't want day one, hundreds of people to sign up and system to fall over. So we wanted to be able to control it and make sure that like it continued to work. And if there were issues, we could manage that. But largely, we haven't seen anything. So if you would like to be included and have your data starting to be collected and try it out, just contact either support or your account manager, and they'll get you going.
Keeping it going. On the endpoint side of the house, for anybody who's using EDR, I'm working really close with the EDR team this day as we continue to kind of like up level, expand what we're doing. And if you're reading here, some of the things I'm most pumped about is our work with, for anybody who has the licenses, whether it's Defender for Business or Defender for Endpoint, we're looking to be able to say, hey, you're already paying for the licenses. Add this Huntress app into Entra and allow us to ingest extra data to enhance. Remember, it's not needed. We ship our own EDR. We build on top of the Defender antivirus that's built into Windows. But this is some of the thing that if you have the licensing, you'll have antivirus for Mac. You'll also have the extra telemetry that comes from EDR that we're looking to pull in. And so where I'm kind of most excited about is we've already started pulling in more Defender for Endpoint telemetry, and it's expanding on top of the Defender antivirus telemetry. And we're actually seeing like novel new techniques that usually are caught by our EDR. But you can imagine the more that we can pull this into prevention, that's that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I will say that there's some really funny deduplication issues of like, okay, sometimes the same exact incident gets caught with Defender for antivirus and the Defender for Endpoint, and you got to dedupe these. So we're still not out of the works and out of the, I would call it out of the easy phase right now. But some of the extra things that we're running into that are kind of like gotchas are sometimes we're finding out that we find detections on places like where somebody accidentally didn't install the Huntress agent. And we're trying to figure out like, how do we still let you know of the detection and let you know that we're probably going to have to escalate this to you and say, yo, we really wanted to report this, but you don't have the Defender Huntress agent on there. So we can't actually respond to it. And that's kind of a interesting gotcha when we're like, oh, we wanted to help out. We couldn't do this. Let's take care of each other. Another reason that bidirectional communication would be really important. And so for those not tracking, this is our primary focus on the endpoint side for Q3. So looking to open this up to everyone, including Mac OS devices towards the end of this quarter. So if you're not already in, again, feedback.huntress.com, please take care of it. And if you notice, this is something that we're really ramping up. Amount of tenants that we've onboarded, detections we've collected. It started very small. This is stuff that, again, if you just reach out to either your account executive or support at huntress.com, we can get these turned on, get you early access as it becomes available. So pretty exciting. And Chris, do you have anything else to add on here? I think that kind of covered a lot of it, but
yeah, no, I think you covered it.
All right. Well, let's go into the exciting stuff too, right? And I don't just mean this exciting stuff. And I will tell you, if anybody's read the news or saw the things, yep, Huntress is growing. We're scaling. We're in a situation where we're not dependent on venture capital. We had, just over $70 million of cash in the bank before raising this. But what's really happening, and where I would point out, is the media went hog wild over valuation. The point that Chris and I want to double down here is, where is 150 million in additional capital going? And the answer is really simple. Massive amounts of R&D, massive amounts of opportunity if we can find the right technology to do M&A, but also, and really the most important, this is, how do you make all this technology work together? Not just like individual products on their own, but truly products that can enhance each other. And Chris and I want to show you a lot about like where this cash is going. Also, I want to highlight, like, yes, I've heard all of you lighten me up on LinkedIn. Yes, they make me wear these terrible clothes. If you can't tell, I'm still in my hacker hoodie and everything else on a 9 to 5. I'm just now required to present a little bit differently as we get a little bit bigger. So thank you for the trolling. I do want to highlight one thing that is really on my mind, and it's probably the most important thing of all the quotes I did. I don't think many folks are tracking that the pace that SMBs are now targeted by cyber criminals is actually outpacing the speed that we as MSPs, MSSPs, and even security practitioners and conferences can educate. Like, we're literally in a race of who can reach one first. Can we reach these SMBs to educate them? Or can cyber criminals reach them to pwn them, hold their data for ransom, extort them, etc.? And so I will tell you that like this right now is one of those things that Chris and I, just as, board members at Huntress, founders at the company, and members of the executive leadership team. This last quote here, like, we just can't wait for where hackers are going next. And so what we're about to share with you, it's pie in the sky. It's big. Some things we're going to get wrong. Some things we're going to depend on this community right now, like you all who help shape our roadmap. We need you to light us up. We need you to take, ownership in this with us, meaning going on this journey, joining in our private betas, do some of our public previews and things like that. So where we're going is Huntress is looking to expand. We have hard data that it's not just identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. It's more faceted than that. And notice I haven't even covered anything like deception. And where we want to give you a heads up is where the market is going is it's kind of three different, call them lanes or categories. There's the security posture management side of the house. That's all the debt and all the things that we should have been doing since, like, I don't know, 99, 2002, something along those lines. All the way through the boring and mundane, call it the backup recovery, BCDR side of the house. On our side of Huntress is we often see, and Chris and I are going to give you verbal examples of what we're seeing on a massive scale now that we have millions of endpoints, millions of identities, and also when it comes to the human side of it, we get to kind of see all the good, but also all the bad. And so, Chris, do you want to just like kind of ebb and flow on this? Like for me, security posture management, maybe you start out by just introducing, I think everybody here knows SPM by one way or another. Sometimes we call it config management. Sometimes we call it hardening, but you want to just like do that whole, like, tell it to me like I'm 5, and we'll go from there. And then I'll pick up on where kind of Huntress is going and what we're seeing.
Yeah, let's do it. So, looking at like security posture management or how do we, set up the configuration or harden your stuff? We really wanted to break out like, what's the problem? And really, as I was looking at it, it's like, there's a lot of systems. There's a lot of configuration settings. One of the things I keep hearing, especially with regards to like Microsoft 365, is we don't even know what all the knobs and switches are. They keep adding new ones. Like, we need somebody dedicated to just figuring this out. So that's all goes into part of the problem of like people are asking, when I go to trade shows or whatever, they're just saying like, hey, I need a good security baseline. Like, is my M365 set up well? And so that is really, the definition of the problem for security posture management. So when we look at that, then we get to the solution and say, okay, well, what does it need to do? These IT teams, they need something that's going to monitor this, that's going to set the configuration, maintain that security baseline so that if, somebody goes in, maybe they're troubleshooting, they change a setting, that about it, that it doesn't just stay that way forever, right? And maybe you're okay with it for like an hour or two while they're troubleshooting, but maybe we need to set it back.
And I remember back in like 2015, you and I were like, we're not even going to go here with Huntress because this is something the RMMs and everybody else should be taking care of. But here we are now in 2024, almost 10 years later, and it's still a train wreck. Hence the reason we're learning more and more that if we don't do more to help kind of upstream that ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure, we get to see fire and brimstone. And sometimes that comes with early prevention. Oftentimes that comes with early detection, but there's still cases that go fully undetected because maybe there was instrumentation missing, or maybe the agent wasn't installed right, or maybe somebody came into your network. So this is really nasty. And obviously, Chris, there's constraints to this problem.
Yep. So whenever we think about a problem and the solution, right, it's never just that easy, right? There's always these constraints that we have to account for, right? And many times, and we didn't list them here because they're often the same for a lot of ours, is like for the SMB, it's got to be cost effective. It can't be super expensive to do. It needs to be managed, right? Like everything we do is managed. The IT teams that we serve, the service providers that we serve, they're looking for somebody else to take this on. They don't want yet another tool that just adds on more work for them. But in addition to those kind of like the typical constraints we see everywhere, we also see other things like, oh, well, what about like support for all these? Not all systems provide the ability to configure them and monitor them and set permissions through the API. So that'll be an ongoing thing where, we'll have to work with vendors and say, hey, can you add an API to do this? Because we really would like to integrate with your product. And And this is not just a problem for us; it's a problem really for the security industry as a whole. Is like, if you can't manage users through the API, well, what are you gonna do?
Yep. So, Chris, obviously, we know security posture management comes in a lot of flavors. For those not familiar, some of these acronyms are just made up or emerging. We were at RSA, and part of like the bingo game at RSA was trying to figure out where is the enterprise going. Usually, when you see the enterprise land on something within a year to maybe 2 years, you see it well adopted and kind of from small business to small enterprise, especially in the MSP world. What's really clear is endpoint security posture management is starting to form. And for those not tracking, kind of like remember how it used to be antivirus was separate than detection and response, and then it went to ETDR, which was endpoint threat detection and response, and now it's just EDR. This is kind of what's happening here on the security posture management. And what you're seeing is kind of three products are starting to merge together: configuration management and hardening. In addition to it, you're seeing your zero trust type technologies, your allow listings. So you could expect some of Huntress's flavor of ESPM as we're doing research, building, buying, etc. There is almost certainly we will have an allow listing capability that's going to be part of what behaviors that product does. And so you will see Huntress with an ESPM that probably does hardening, does allow listing. Everything will be fully managed, but could even include deception, right? We're trying to figure out where deception lands. And notice some of the things as you go further to the right, it gets murky. Like right now, SSPM is an accepted enterprise standard. It stands for SaaS, Security Posture Management. And it just includes like, do you really know where people are logging in with M365 credentials? Even worse, what are they logging into with their personal credentials that you have no clue they're using, but uploading your data and storing your data or using the Zapier workflows to integrate multiple systems? This is a real problem, especially as threat actors are now almost immediately landing on the endpoint, dumping credentials and pivoting towards the SaaS and identity-based world. This is a real hurdle. We can tell you from seeing millions of endpoints and identities, this world is starting to blur. They used to be very separate, and now the tradecraft is interlinked.
Yep. Yeah. I
Oddly
mean, just
enough,
imagine you like our business, and instead of having a lot of files on your desktop that you email around, you have a lot of files in Google Drive, right? Like, that's where the attackers are going to want to go, right? If they want to ransom you, maybe the most valuable place to ransom you is just deleting everything out of your Google Drive.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. So one of the questions we got in Q&A was, yo, would our flavors to SPM utilize like some sort of proprietary Huntress baseline? Are we going to tie to maybe an existing STIG or vendor guideline? Maybe it's the CIS configurations. I will tell you personally, the answer is probably yes. Like you could imagine, we understand people use many different flavors of standards. So supporting folks in whatever standard they use matters. But I will tell you, we've spent a lot of time. And even though I have personal bias towards CIS because it actually considers the difference between, for instance, your small customers, your medium-sized customers, and truly your enterprise, I think that's a nuance that's missing in most of the NIST 800 series, etc. But my point of this is to highlight some of these standards omit details. Like a great example is when you hear you need to log this data. Log the event logs. Well, what event logs? What about the event logs that are completely useless? What about the details in the event logs that are just literally spam that cost hundreds of gigs of storage? We're literally pulling apart each of these. And in some way, like Huntress doesn't want to maintain its own proprietary baseline. That seems bad for the community. But what we see our role, especially with you all helping us, like us being the conduit and to help power our bigger community, we're trying to work with CISA to establish these standards like we recently just did with the RMM baseline and hardening guidance and things like that. So the answer will be yes. It'll be largely mapped to things where it makes sense. So you can quickly say, yes, we're compliant, etc. But if anybody's ever done compliance, it's about as boring as possible. So you can imagine we're looking to sex this up a little bit, bring a little bit more appeal of like, hardening doesn't need to be boring. And to be very frank, hardening plays a big role when you can see like what you've thwarted. So you could imagine there's going to be a little bit of reinventing some of these things, especially when you get to maybe some of the more mundane. Just keeping it succinct, there is some of these things to the right, which we will delay. Like I love the cloud, and truly cloud infrastructure like AWS infrastructure, which we sit on. We also have Azure infrastructure. Most of our partners and customers don't really have a whole lot of true cloud infrastructure. Most of the time, they're just cloning something to Azure, or they might have a little bit of Google Compute. But to be very frank, it's going to come far to the right. So this is, again, a roadmap, and roadmaps have priorities. We're also keeping a close eye on the human side. The world of security awareness training is dying just the way that the world of antivirus died. Security awareness training is not enough just to be aware. Phishing simulations are great, but we're really getting into cyber resilience. And it seems like one of the words that could land is human security posture management or human risk management. So we'll see where it goes. We're not looking to define a quadrant. We might have to change things up, but I hope this shows you like this is going to be a key part of what Huntress is doing. We've tried to ignore it. We thought vendors were going to come in here and do a better job. We've listened to our partners. We've listened to you. We know that you don't want to spend your time and your talent doing this. So we're going to do as much with automation as possible. When we have to bring our humans in the loop, our humans are going to manage this just like EDR. And our whole goal is to free your team up so they can be, handling all kinds of other things that are actually relevant to your business, not these mundane. So look forward to this coming. And I know some of you are asking great questions like, is this like this product? I think our version of security posture management, which just like how we have an EDR and an ITDR, I would expect we will have separate SKUs and separate products for what the endpoint is versus what somebody's looking to do for SaaS. And it will probably be a combination of many products that you see that are currently like many multiple products. We will probably commoditize that into the point that it's just democratized for you into one single product. So you don't have 10,000 levers. You just set it and forget it. Chris, you okay if we move from this one? I know we've seen a lot of these incidents. We talked about the stuff that we see. I think detection and response, we all know this was where Huntress started. This is our flagship. You want to walk through a little bit of this? And I think this is kind of table stakes, but I know what happens when you assume.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, I mean, we've always done some sort of detection and response. We've continued to enhance that over time. And as we look at detection and response, it's really like, okay, what are the new systems? What are the new applications? What are these new mission critical systems that we need to also be able to detect against and respond to? And so IT teams don't have the time and the expertise to monitor all these systems. They don't want to necessarily go and write their own code to do all that. So we need to be able to bring our automation and our SOC to be able to do a lot of this.
So Chris, when you're
there we go.
Yep. You want to tee up the solution side?
Yep. So ideally, we will really provide support for a bunch of different systems beyond just the endpoint. So think about things like we've already done Microsoft 365, but think about like Google Workspace and all the other places where you could be using like a third-party system. How do we integrate with those? How do we bring in more data? We want to associate the common resources across all these systems. So users, your users probably have access to a bunch of different systems. How do we correlate those? Correlate IP addresses, domains, all the things that we're going to be able to see so that we can remediate incidents across all of these, right? If a user account is compromised, how do we go and make sure that that account is locked out and password reset everywhere is a good example. But again, it goes back, what are the constraints? What are the things that makes this hard? There's always going to be more systems that people will want than we will have. That's really a never-ending thing, right? It's constantly figuring out what's the next highest priority thing and do that, and then figure out the next one and the next one. So it'll always be, a never-ending list of stuff there. And then again, there's the challenges with what do those systems support in terms of what data can we get from them that we can audit? What can we do in terms of remediations? So still a lot to really figure out there on that front.
So, Chris, obviously, I don't think we need to go super far in depth on this one. Most people know your endpoints need covered. And by the way, we had a great question earlier that I purposely waited on, which was, hey, if you're maintaining and managing Defender for endpoint, could that mean we could see Huntress moving over to the Linux or Nix style operating systems. And for those who've missed the previous episodes of Product Lab, I'll try to provide a link here in just a second. We've actually shown that in previous episodes that we've successfully run Defender for Endpoint on Linux environments and pulled data back into some of the Huntress UI and some of our staging area or testing areas. So this is a direction. Again, I don't want to overset any expectations because adding a significant set of operating systems that are very disparate is a big additional add or a big take on that we're looking to broaden this out and prove it on Windows and Mac. But you can imagine my quote earlier was, we can't wait to go where hackers go, right? Huntress is going to have to get ahead of some of these. So we will kind of bite off what we can chew. If anybody's ever seen a company implode, I've seen a couple of them that eventually become like Cisco or Oracle companies. You go too fast, you can actually get ourselves in some real big trouble where, for instance, trying to do everything makes everything at Huntress mediocre. We are super aware that that happens. I'm looking to do the acquiring, not be acquired. So you can imagine we're really going to try to temper about what we bite off and when we do it. I would just continue encouraging, like, light us up here, give us the use cases, help me prioritize, especially because we kind of have an endpoint team that's multiple operating system already. It'll help me prioritize. And I really mean it. Like, this is the number one way to shape us. So if you have people that are interested in, for instance, shaping the same decision, have them jump on Product Lab. And I appreciate everybody's reactions. One little nuance. A lot of people forget that SIEM is a form of detection and response. A lot of people look at SIEM as just storage, and I get it. Retention is super important. That's usually whether cyber insurance or compliance, we're trying to like check that box. But if you're not actually getting valuable data out of your logs, if you're not getting actionable, here's the next steps, and having those actions taken on your behalf by the team, like, you're just actually storage, your log storage here. So I've seen weird commentary about like SIEM is dead. CrowdStrike just released a next gen SIEM for enterprise. SIEM is far from dead. And you'll see if you notice Chris's point earlier, we're looking to ship SIEM in a released form that we'll probably call early access, meaning everybody who jumps on early access will get a substantially reduced price while we mature it and move it all the way through, general availability. And that'll probably come out. Chris, what are we thinking? Black Hat time, kind of like August
first
time.
Week in August. Yep.
So moving real quick, keeping it going, dude. We're a half hour into this. I know this here is one of the most boring places. You and I are passionate. Do you want to talk a little bit about backup? Because I've kept this thing kind of on the back burner, but maybe you set the tone and then you and I will just tear it apart of where we think we need to reinvent backup and recovery.
Yep. So, I put in here in the kind of the problem statement of like, backup and recovery hasn't really seen innovation in many years. We've actually we tried this a couple of times back before Kaseya acquired Datto. We went to Datto and said, hey, we'd really love to be able to integrate our security tool with your backup and recovery solution so that when we identify something bad that happens, we'd love to be able to like use an API to specifically recover this machine or that machine or these files or whatever. And they were like, oh, that's interesting. We've never thought of that. We don't have anything to do that. And then, they never did anything with it. So, we see that as kind of the problem of like, hey, backup is table stakes. Everybody's got to have it. But it doesn't really integrate with much. It's really boring. Like, how do we figure out the next set of things to make both like setting up backup easy and restoring easy? So it's not the thing that, when something bad happens, you got to, pull out your notes and dust them off and figure out like, oh crap. Okay. What was I supposed to do here? How's this supposed to work? We'd love for it to be integrated so it could just be an automated response of, hey, this machine got ransomed. Go restore all the files.
All right, keep it going. Obviously, we know there's extra. I'm going to give you one more, Chris, because I feel like this world of backup is just old school and commoditized. I think folks most know, like, the real legwork in backup is, one, is it working? Two, does it actually restore? If anybody's had to do a massive, restoration after a ransomware incident, like, it's not easy. It's very time consuming. You have to do some of this stuff at night. Usually people are ticked off if they're truly down. So there's some of the places that we're just looking and thinking that, like, what if we could integrate multiple of these systems together and automate part of this as the remediation process? Like, why do you need so much humans involved in recovering files? Chris, do you want to maybe pull that thread a little bit of what you were thinking on that end? And obviously constraints is going to be related to this.
Yeah, I mean, we know a lot of the stuff because we have the agent on the endpoint, right? And if by chance, and it does happen, an attacker gets by all of the stuff and ransoms all the files, our agent is there. We already know which files have been ransomed, which haven't, and we can actually figure it out and start to roll back and start to replace those files very quickly. So that is like kind of what we're thinking is like, how can we make this more like actionable, more of an automated thing?
Yeah, and I'm going to avoid getting salty, Chris, but going back to kind of like my issue with security posture management of how are we in 2024 and some of these things just aren't done for us in an automated fashion at a cost that's like affordable to kind of small business, to small enterprise. I just don't know how we're here in 2024. I know you and I have tried working with every major backup provider and asking, like, we know all the files that are ransom. We know all the file extensions. Give us an API to integrate into so we can restore the files automatically. That is not happening. I will tell you, nothing about this world makes me want to build a backup. It's kind of old school. But if you really think back to it, most partners we've talked to are like, I don't need truly full system, right? Restoration. I just need my files back. I can restore from a VM or Hyper-V or, gold disk image fairly quick. I just need those files back as soon as possible. And if they haven't completely crippled the operating system, just get me there. Get me the database back. Get me the files that I need to be able to, do scheduling, etc. And it just blows my mind that this is not happening already. So I will tell you that if you can't tell, there's a little bit of frustration from Chris and I. And thankfully, we're finally at the size now. Like, if anybody's ever like asked, for a loan for a car, maybe you had to put a down payment on a house. Like, it's really hard to get. Asking for $150 million in venture capital and not losing your company and becoming a private equity company is even harder. So if you can't tell, like, part of our process of raising this Series D, we came to them with this pitch and we're like, this is what's needed. And so we don't know what the acronym will be. We know we're not going to follow the typical BCDR. We actually think some of the mass virtualization, and I'm curious for everybody that's on this webinar live with us, do you get the big bang for the buck when, for instance, a computer goes down and it instantly, restores itself in the cloud that then you can jump in? The more we've talked to partners, the more that they're like, look, for what I'm paying for that extra convenience, I just want my freaking files back. And whether those files live on the endpoint or they're in SharePoint or, OneDrive or whatever you use, Dropbox, etc., they just want their files back that were ransomed, that were lost, that were, maybe it's even just destroyed because of something physical happened, right? The hard drive cooked or a smart disk error was ignored for too long. And now that sucker is clicking if it's still an old school and not a solid state drive. Like, these things are things that we're hearing in mass. And so if you can't tell, we don't know, is it cloud backup and recovery? Is it SaaS backup and recovery? Is it endpoint? But I can tell you right now, we're looking at technologies to integrate with. We're looking at technologies to buy. But we are honestly considering, do we need to do this? And I appreciate that comment about Rubrik at a price we can afford. This is definitely the direction Huntress is going. We've got the funding to be able to do this. And so if you can't tell, we're not going to do this all at once. When we started this webinar off and told you we're going to give you a peek into the next couple years, this is the same pitch. And if you can't tell, many of these places we've already tested. We've already built some proof of concept code. We're now moving into like earlier stages of research and development or earlier stages of hiring. And I just hope that helps get everybody like fired up that that's the direction we're going. So Chris, do you want to get ready to tie this all together and end this sucker with a little bit on autonomous orchestration and why this is so important?
Yeah. This one is, for me, it was kind of almost like, it almost seemed too obvious. Like I felt like I was stating the obvious kind of, but like the problem is really very similar to what we've been talking about. It's like, hey, you've got all these systems. How do you coordinate response and remediation activities across them? How do you coordinate things like offboarding? And I know this is a problem for us. This is a challenge for us as a company of like 360-ish, 370 something people. every SaaS app that we use, and we use a lot of them, there's like 250 plus different SaaS apps that we use across all the departments. They all have different and varying capabilities in terms of, do they support single sign-on? Do they support two-factor? Can we require two-factor? Can we use like SCIM to add users? How can we offboard them? Everything's different. And so, if there's an incident, and we've had this once where we actually had one of our employees got phished, got a phone call, stuff happened, and we had to go and try to figure out where all of our accounts were and try to like lock them out and reset the password on them, and it was a lot of work. So how can we like automate that orchestration across all things, and not just for necessarily just remediation, but like also information gathering, right? If something happens in one system that looks kind of sketchy, like maybe we see some M365 stuff and we're like, yeah, we're not really sure about that. How do we go and gather more information from each of the endpoints where that user is logged in, pull back some stuff, review it, and how do we make that automated, right? How do we not have to have a human in the loop to do that? I'd love a human in the loop to review it, but how can we just like have that automatically done? So that's a lot of what we're looking at. One of the constraints we're looking at here is, how do we balance automation with human in the loop, right? We don't want to just get, hey, everything's automated and don't worry about it, because you can end up in problems where stuff happens and you didn't intend it to happen, or it wasn't supposed to do it that way, or whatever. So how do we balance those two things is really something we've always come to, of like, we're doing it. We talked last month about escalations of, hey, how do we balance some of that? We want to automatically lock stuff out, but how do we really ask you first? Hey, is this intended? Is this normal? Is this a new use case, right? Maybe this person just moved. So that's some of the constraints we're looking at there.
So obviously a lot to unpack, and I'm, being a laggard here on some of the constraints as we're moving this through, but I think you nailed it. So one of the things that's different though about Huntress is, usually in the enterprise, this is a separate product. It's called a security, orchestration and automated response product. We look at our platform as, this is just table stakes. It's just our platform. Our product should be doing this for you. So when you consume multiple products, why would they not talk with each other? That to me is a very table stakes thing. We already have some of this capability in our platform, but it's very immature compared to like, it's very easy to be able to collaborate with 3 to 4 products on a platform than it is for like 13 or 14 products. Not to say that we'll be there overnight, but when you're building truly to be like an enduring company of consequence for the community, you sure as hell better prepare to be able to do this at scale. And that's one of the things right now that we're making it work, but we're not ready to kind of do this at scale for the future of Huntress. And so, that's a lot that we've thrown at you. That's that power of the platform of connecting all these things together to a central orchestration hub. It's not by accident. We've been using a graphic like this for a couple years. Some of these were gray. You notice how clouds is still gray. We don't operate there. We turned on identities when we built the ITDR product. We turned on data when Chris built the SIEM out that we're getting ready to launch. But this has kind of been the goal from the beginning. And what's really exciting is a lot of our partners have known us since we were, 3 punk founders from NSA back in 2015. And the only thing I want to double down is just a huge, massive thank you for all of you on like helping us like reach some of our vision. We finally got the type of funding and support that is truly enterprise level, the stuff that will prevent us from getting like acquired by private equity. And so I just hope that, all these things like really kind of make sense. And for instance, I know a lot of you in chat were saying, hey, take a look at this product or that product's backup, etc. There's an almost zero chance we'll OEM license somebody else's product. For those that are also nerds, but finance geeks as well, those extra gross margins that you have to pay another vendor, it's a recipe for like having low gross margins, which is one of the reasons many companies get acquired by private equity, because their valuation is then lower. They're not making the cash that they need to be able to stay healthy. And so for us, we'll heavily consider like, although most of the time Huntress tries to be first mover and get first mover advantage, there is real second mover advantage where we can get feedback from you all about like, what do you like? but more importantly, what do you dislike so we can avoid those traps? So I just really encourage, if any of you are already using one or more products at Huntress, like that communication with your account management, account managers and technical account managers, the more you can feed them of what you want to build, like it actually goes to us. We're one team. The sales team is the same team that collaborates with product. That's the same team that collaborates with the SOC. And we all look and get feedback from each other to kind of make this bigger, grander vision. So again, I'm pretty pumped to be hanging with you. I'm really thankful that you all are kind of crushing it with us. And the parts that I would just end is we're trying not to go a full hour, but keeping this a little bit shorter. We need all you to join in the fun. These private previews, like I'm not just asking for the sake of asking. Our partner base is what's allowed Huntress to not end up as just yet another vendor chasing dollars. It turns out we can make a big difference, crush security, and deliver enterprise expertise at the price that makes sense with your help. And so we're going to keep doing it. We do want you to keep us level-headed, though. We want you to tell us like you're getting ahead of your skis. We want you to tell us if a product sucks. When you move fast, we're going to stumble. We know this. We know we're going to burn some of that 150 million in bad, dumb places. We're probably going to do an M&A that just doesn't go the way that we want to. Or we look at something and said, why did we build that? We should have been building something much harder instead of actually, building it ourselves. We just want you to keep us humble. We want you interacting with us, whether it's at trade shows, whether it's on social, LinkedIn, Reddit, things like that. And give it to us straight. We're not a team that ever asks for you to sugarcoat it. And you've always done a good job at us, helping us kind of be those champions for you all, but while also being the champions for us and keeping us humble. So, I think, Chris, I'm out of, many motivational words or direction. Do you have anything outside of like join the fun that you want to leave folks as we kind of wrap up this episode of Product Lab?
No, I mean, I think you covered it. Like, hey, this is a community effort, right? Like we're building products, or we're trying to build products that everyone really loves, that fit the problems that you have and the constraints that you have, whether that's budget or management or whatever. But we can't do that alone, right? We need your feedback. We need your guidance. We need we need all of that.
So, Chris, considering you just got hit up by media this morning, asked for perspective on the Kaspersky ban out of, the US, one of the questions that came in chat from Jeremy is, with all this expansion, are we open up multiple locations, possibilities, or just keeping the core Huntress headquarter locations? I will tell you, for us, we're a very, even though I diehard came from the US military, I'm very supportive of Western values, democracy, privacy, good data privacy laws that allow people to stay out of your data when it makes sense, things like that. So you will see Huntress keep in very Western countries. So we've headquartered so far in US, Canada, Australia. We have offices in the UK, Ireland, and New Zealand side of the house. You can imagine, again, that's not preventing us from moving somewhere like Western Europe if we wanted to, like maybe a Germany, Italy, etc. We're going to continue expanding go-to-market for Latin America, but you're going to see where data continues to be stored and where the humans maintain. They're probably not going to go very far out of the countries we're already in. And the reason I say that is the further you start getting out, the harder you get, especially now that politics are so fickle on like data privacy and things change so quick. We're really trying to double down on the places that allow us to protect our clients, even when it means protect our clients from ourselves as well, meaning the pressures our company could get. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. It's not easy, but I don't expect any more massive expansions, just doubling down and finishing our incorporation in UK and Ireland, and some potential expansion in New Zealand. For those will allow us, if you really think about like where we've spread, and if you think about threat hunting, the time zone starts on the eastern coast of Australia and New Zealand. It then moves to the western coast of Australia, New Zealand, great democratic countries, great folks that we can actually prosecute if they do something shady to our data, right? Or your data. It then follows over to Europe. That's where our team between UK, Ireland picks up, hunts through your data. It then moves to East Coast US and Canada, West Coast US and Canada. Hawaii gets a little bit of a play back to East Coast Australia. So we really think that even if we have to serve Latin America more like, EMEA is technically what they call it, not just English speaking Europe that we're in right now, or even moving to APAC, like the Pacific area. There is plans to service that, but if you can't tell, just like our products, we're really trying to double down where we're good and not bite off more than we can chew and then end up, Huntress, a Cisco company or something like that. Huntress, a Microsoft company, might be just as, controversial, but all right. I appreciate everybody's questions. I think these were awesome. I really appreciate chat. Massive thanks, team, for like doubling down on these things that really matter. And let's keep it going. Please spreading the word if you can on social. Simple things like amplifying success, or even just giving your team a thank you. Like the team at Huntress grinds hard. We know you grind hard at your job too. Give them a thank you. I'll continue to pass those kudos too if you tag me in it. But it's just some of those like silly little things actually matter more than when it comes to like being able to do things efficient and not having to spend all of our 150 million on ads. So thank you again, everybody. Let's keep it going, and just really appreciate everything you brought through this webinar. We'll see you in July for the next episode of Product Lab.
In August.
August? We don't have a July one?
We're at the summit.
Ooh, well, I guess I'll see you in August. Thanks, Chris. Bye.